A reading from Psalm 116. I love the Lord, because the Lord has heard my voice and my supplications. Because the Lord inclined an ear to me. Therefore I will call on the Lord as long as I live. The snares of death encompassed me. The pangs of Sheol laid hold on me. I suffered distress and anguish. Then I called on the name of the Lord. O Lord, I pray, save my life. Gracious is the Lord and righteous. Our God is merciful. The Lord protects the simple. When I was brought low, the Lord saved me. Return, O my soul, to your rest, for the Lord has dealt bountifully with you. For you have delivered my soul from death, my eyes from tears, my feet from stumbling. I walk before the Lord in the land of the living. Holy wisdom, holy word.
Thanks be to God.
If I were to sum up some of the emails that I receive from congregations on a regular basis, it would sound a lot like the middle of this psalm. Save us. While so many congregation leaders reach out to me right when they realize that there's a discrepancy between their expenses and their income, many wait to reach out until the situation is much more dire. And death, or church closure, is right around the corner. This psalm is set between two extremes: Sheol, the land of the dead, from verse 3, and the land of the living, from verse 9. As the Reverend Dr. Carl Jacobson shared in his Working Preacher article on this text, Sheol, which is literally the place where all who have died go in the ancient Israel understanding of life and death, is often employed metaphorically in the Psalms. Sheol is not just a place, the land of the dead, but it is a state of being. The psalmist feels dead and is lost, forlorn, troubled, while so much very alive. The benefits of God's action are that the psalmist is delivered from death and restored to a life that really feels like living. These congregations that reach out to me, like the psalmist, are caught between these two extremes, between death and life, scarcity and abundance, emptiness and rebirth. However, as I read the psalm, I couldn't help but wonder, did the deliverance the psalmist experienced look like they expected? Was it, as the NRSV proclaims, a healing from illness, a restoration to a fully healed body and mind? Or did it look a little different than they expected, as so much healing does? Might their life have been fundamentally changed by that experience and not just restored? I hear in my conversations with so many congregation leaders a cry for complete restoration back to another era of ministry. An era where people came to church just because the doors were open. An era where folding chairs lined the aisles for Easter services to accommodate everyone. An era where Sunday school rooms were filled to the brim. Anyone else heard stories like that? While this might certainly be a part of the salvation that God is bringing, I wonder if God's vision of deliverance is different from ours. Might it look like an Episcopal church in Detroit, Michigan, whose congregation had dwindled in the early 2000s, but has found new life again by engaging a new population in their neighborhood that they had never engaged before? Young men, many of whom were previously incarcerated and struggling to find work. The pastor, who was a former business person, helped people in the community to start their own businesses using their God-given skills and talents, and invited other business people in the congregation to tithe of their time to support these entrepreneurial ventures. This church has transformed lives as they brought the good news to their community. Might it look like a dying congregation in Inver Grove Heights, Minnesota, not too far from here, who sold their property to the Vineyard Church next door? This property now holds long-term homeless housing, and the proceeds from this sale allowed the Vineyard Church to expand its space to house both an English-speaking and Spanish-speaking congregation that meet at the same time. They are two languages, one church family, and this has been a blessing to their community. Creating relationships across boundaries of language and culture as they love God, love people, and change the world. Might it look like my congregation in a small town in Washington State, which nearly crumbled after its pastor and many members left in the early 2010s following the 2009 ELCA vote. After being torn apart, the Spirit knit them back together. They hired a part-time pastor, which I'm sure felt very scary at the time for the congregation and the leader entering into that space. But it's been a blessing to both the congregation and the pastor, and has allowed them to embark on a new era of ministry, led by the congregation's lay leaders. I wonder if God's vision of salvation is different from ours. I wonder if God's restoration doesn't mean we go back to who and what we were before, but experience new life, rebirth into something we could never have asked for or imagined. God not only repairs, God creates. God is constantly creating new life in us and in our congregations, moving us ever forward into God's preferred future, which is so much more vast than anything we could imagine for ourselves. God is not finished with us or our congregations yet. God's Spirit is still alive, working within us in the wilderness, on the cross, in the empty tomb, and right here in this chapel today. God is still creating, still working, still moving, still alive, even in the face of data that would tell us that the church is dying. Like the psalmist, we too will walk before the Lord in the land of the living. We may not know exactly what that land will look like, and we may not know the path to get there, but we can trust that God's hand is leading us and God's love is supporting us on that messy journey from death to life. Amen.